Welcome everyone to Local Grit. Today I'm with Vanessa Green, and if you have overlooked copywriting in your business, you've missed out on probably one of the most effective tools for the digital and non-digital marketing toolbox. Vanessa Green is the founder of Greenlight Content, is Hamilton's premier copywriter and content creator. And as written on her website, writing that gets to the heart of your business. Vanessa, welcome to Local Grit.
Hi, thanks for having me, Alex. Glad to be here.
So you grew up in Hamilton, you got your degree in the East Coast, I believe, and then you landed here in Hamilton, which is a city pretty much what's well known for its grit. Do
hmm
you find that grit comes through with the clients that you choose and how you write? For example, like when you're writing for a local organization like the Hamilton Literacy Council, do you try to have some grit into that, or do you just try and write what's best for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, just to clarify, I was born in Hamilton and moved here like 7 years ago, but I didn't actually grow up here, which I'm quite sad about. I kind of wish I did. I'm like a wannabe Hamilton kid, but I'm making the most of it now. But yeah, it's a great question. Like, I think, yeah, Hamilton is super gritty. It's what I love about the city. And I think like that is part of my approach too. Like, I try and be very honest and direct in my writing. And I think that's just, that's best practice in general, even though it is kind of reflective of the way Hamilton is as a city. I think Hamiltonians are kind of like very no bullshit. They have like, they like things to be clear and simple and they don't want any fluff. And so I try and use that approach in my marketing and my writing when I'm working for clients. And I think, yeah, like just keeping it kind of like no nonsense and grounded and really human. I think that's what a lot of marketing is kind of missing. Like we are, there's like too much jargon and fluff. And I think just keeping it really authentic, even though that word it's also been kind of overused. But I do think that the idea behind that is still what should guide a lot of marketing today, especially when a lot of it doesn't sound very human. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does. I've advised many clients on their marketing, and it's hard to get that messaging of how they are in person onto their website. Now, funny story, not funny story, but we both worked for Digital Main Street while you did programs for City of Hamilton, especially during COVID for City of Main Street. That's where I first learned about how your approach was, and I just loved how you just had exactly what you just said. It's very realistic, very
Mhm.
simple language that people do try to overcomplicate a lot of messaging. So,
Mhm.
um, when you came up with the workshop names that actually got small business owners into the door, what were those local businesses really up against? This is during COVID, trying to go digital, and how did your words give them a push?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I was doing workshops. I've been doing them for about 4 years with like the City of Hamilton, the Hamilton Business Center, and at the time it was supported by Digital Main Street. And I think the idea was really, a lot of small businesses don't have big marketing budgets. They're not going to outsource to like an expensive agency. Like, how can they kind of get it done in house? And even if they were maybe going to hire someone, how do they know what good looks like when it comes to copy and messaging and that kind of thing? So the idea was really trying to remove some of that like overwhelm that I think a lot of businesses who don't have a marketing background, business owners kind of experience. So the names of the workshops were meant to just really kind of, again, be simple and direct. So I think the one I've run the most, probably like a dozen times with the City of Hamilton and Digital Main Street, is how to write high impact copy for your business, even if you're not a copywriter. And so that was really like, I think because it kind of said what it was on the tin, there was no fluffy jargon. And it also kind of helped, give them that confidence. Like, you don't have to be a professional copywriter to like write really strong messaging for your business that will appeal to your audience and reflect your brand. So I think we just tried to keep the messaging and the titles really simple but like still compelling. And it's funny because one of the things in the writing workshop, the copywriting workshop, I talk about is how important headlines are, how important like your subject line or your blog headline or your headline on your website. Like, those things are the most important because it's the first thing people see. And if they lose interest, then you've lost them, and it doesn't matter what else is in the email or on your website, like they're never going to read it. So we talk about the importance of spending a lot of time like that hook, and really bringing them in, and keeping them engaged. But it's interesting because another thing I talk about in the workshop is it's a quote actually from Einstein of all people, that basically says like if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it well enough. And I think about that a lot because it is very difficult to simplify the complex. It's literally why people hire marketing experts and agencies to take these like really technical ideas and distill them into something simple that will appeal to their audience. And so I think there is sometimes this desire to like, write in really complex ways or try and sound clever or, try and big up your copy and write, beautiful prose or something like that. And I think, it's really comes down to just like understanding the core tenets of what you're offering and how that offers a solution to your audience and simply stating that, which is a lot more difficult than it sounds.
It really is, but I do find that a lot of people do. I remember helping this one client. She sold organic cheesecloth, and her writing was just so. It was trying to sound professional, and at the same time, it didn't sound professional. And
Mhm.
I said, I've met with you a couple of times, and I'm like, your playfulness and your humor and stuff that's not coming through on your website. And she
Yeah.
literally said to me, "You're allowed to do that." And it's funny how people think that you have to follow these rules that they don't really know about, that we've learned in maybe grade school about grammar and how to do, but that's not copywriting, is it?
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. No, it's and it's an interesting point because I think um that is kind of a default. We're like, oh well, it's like we're penning a high school English essay. And it's like, but that's not what people want to read. And like, if you put yourself in their shoes, like that's not, what you would want to read on the receiving end either. So I think we talk a lot about just finding that human emotional connection when you write. Like even if you're in B2B, like I write for a lot of B2B clients, it's like there's still a human being making that decision at the end of the day. So how do you appeal to their emotions? How do you recognize them as a human who's in a challenging position and you're going to help solve it? Thinking about things like offering relief or reducing stress. And, sometimes we get hung up on features and, technical aspects, but really it's kind of like, how can you connect with that emotional part of them, whether they're a consumer or, you're selling to a business.
Yeah, if you can just, I read this the other day. If you could just show how useful you can be to someone, that
Mhm.
is far more effective than flowery words. I know that some
Totally.
people try to get into the keywords for the SEO stuff, which is fair. Like
Mhm.
I understand that. But it does have to. I think simplicity is best. Um, you've worked with a lot of different types of businesses. So you worked for like Vetster, which was really interesting to learn about. They do telemedicine for businesses as a perk, for their employees as a perk. You
Mhm.
worked for Abrizo Food Metrics, which helps food supplies make smarter moves. Food suppliers, sorry, rather, and then IPEX, which you wrote a white paper and case studies for plumbers and builders, which I find most interesting are the case studies, but they're all
Mhm.
very different. How do you approach your copywriting for such diversity? And then how do you use your case studies, which I find is something that not a lot of people really think about with their marketing and copywriting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, a lot of copywriters and content marketers, niche down. They'll just pick one sector or industry to work in. And I didn't do that because I really like learning about, all these different industries and business owners and audiences.
Me
So
too.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, not, no, not to dismiss people that do niche down because there's totally a
Yeah.
need for that. And I think I understand why people do it. And I think just kind of like, for me, leaning on my journalism background, like every day as a journalist, you're learning about a new topic and you kind of have to become an expert or interview the experts and learn as much as you can. So that is kind of what motivated me to kind of not be specific in terms of like my sectors that I specialize in. But I think the approach I take is really, again, like it kind of goes back to my journalism background is that, it's really about asking questions, interviewing. Like for all of the work I do, I interview my clients. So I would never, just take a brief and go away and write it. Like a lot of it is about understanding their business, asking them questions and asking their clients questions, which is where case studies really come into the mix. And again, even though those three businesses that you mentioned are very different, like the approach and the framework I use is the same. It's really about understanding the audience pain points, how their solution helps them, what makes those businesses different in their market. So it's really about, asking a lot of questions, understanding like goals and objectives of their audience. And then obviously you still need to understand the specific language that they use within their sectors. But a lot of it is really about understanding audience need, and helping them show how their solution kind of solves for that. And I think that's, case studies have become so popular in terms of like the work that I'm doing for clients over the last few months, because it's kind of like letting someone else do the marketing for you. I think we're becoming increasingly skeptical of people making claims, because anyone can say anything on their website, but like, can you get someone to back it up for you? And that's where case studies come in, because you're like, here's an actual example of how our solution helped a business, and we've put it in context, and we've got a great testimonial, and they're kind of doing that selling for us. So, and I apply the same approach to, any customer I work with or any client I work with, because effectively that's what you're doing, is showcasing value. And then, obviously the language, once you get down to like the nitty gritty, needs to reflect that sector they work in, but the overarching approach is kind of still the same.
Yeah, and the hidden bonus in that, which not a lot of people realize with case studies, is that you're able to get companies to talk to their clients, and it's amazing how many businesses don't speak to their clients who I've worked with, and I know that some of it is they feel like they're bothering them, but you don't understand, like when you get that information from clients, you are helping your clients by having a better service. And then
Hmm.
that case study becomes that proof, as you said, for future clients. So in many ways, that work is not just you writing the words or getting the words, it's getting the businesses to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting or a little bit of the hard work at first, but the payoffs are truly phenomenal.
Hmm.
I just heard just recently Rand Fishkin, who's part of Spark Turo. I don't know if you know him. He's a
Yeah.
marketer. He's a bit of a nerdy, and he was saying the other benefit that case studies have is because with this huge push with AI, what happens is that it allows your SEO to do work for you, because these case studies are what they're looking for to give to customers. And
Hmm.
so it changes how people are searching in a certain way, because people are specifically asking these questions that are answered in the case studies that you do.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and so yeah, I think that it's the case studies is the future, and I think that they are super, super important, definitely.
Yeah,
So
so I was just gonna say on that, like they're a real powerhouse, and I think the other benefit they add is like, a lot of companies can't afford to do like market research. But case
right.
studies kind of are a form of market research in a way. You're asking questions about what did they like about your service, what didn't they like, what were they looking for in a provider, what were the results like, and then you also get a testimonial from them that you can use in your marketing as well. So like there's all these different benefits to this one piece of content that allows it to kind of, you can kind of use it in all these different places, both for research purposes, but also like for marketing purposes. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I think case
Mm,
studies have like they're a bit of an investment, but they have a huge payoff, I think, in terms of how you can use them.
agreed, totally. So, I mean, just, going off on that, what would you say is the biggest mistake that clients make with their copywriting? I'll give you some of mine that I've noticed as a non-professional copywriter and just general digital marketer, but what's one that you see often?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I think so I think the first one is really like a lot of clients, if they have to do their own copywriting, will just sit and start writing. And to me, like the copywriting process is like 90% research, 90% prep, 90% interviews, 90% like the writing part is like almost the last thing. And it's almost not the smallest thing because it's important, but there's so much work you have to do before you could even write like, one word of copy. So I think like not maybe investing in that research piece. And I think when clients do that, they often just sit and start writing, they're like, well, I'll make some assumptions, or I'll write about what I think is important. And like that kind of copy never really converts because it's not based on the needs of their audience. So I think writing from their perspective rather than what is relevant to their audience is one of the biggest mistakes. And the other one for me is really not backing up what they say. So like when I am interviewing clients, especially for things like website copy, they'll say, oh, well, we're like the number one heavy haul trucking company in Hamilton. And I'm like, okay, how? Why? Like, do you have awards? Do you have reviews? Are you the highest rated on Google? Have you like, are you working with like top tier clients? Like, how? And I think a lot of clients, it's a great exercise when I do it because it forces them to have to figure out how they can back up what they're saying. So whether that is like, okay, well, yeah, actually, we do have a lot of reviews, but we don't really talk about them, but we should, mention that on the website. Or, we've worked with over 500 clients, but we've never really talked about that. So it makes them kind of think about how do you back up what you're saying? How do you prove, answer that like how kind of question? And a lot of clients I don't think really have the follow through. Like they make a lot of claims, but then they can't really back it up. And I think copy needs to really have that kind of proof behind it to be impactful. Because again, we're very skeptical people. We're very dubious, and we need proof, and we want you to prove, that what you're saying is true.
Yeah, no, definitely. For me, I think the number one, and this is mostly from the solopreneurs than from the bigger businesses, is how they miswrite the about me page or about you page. And really,
Mm-hmm.
they just give you, I was born in 1941 and I
Yeah.
went to this college and I actually got this accolade. And if you're a writer, that could be understandable. But really, your about you page is how your skills help your client. People actually
Hmm.
don't really give a shit about you.
Yeah.
They want to know how you're going to solve their problem.
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of people misuse the about me page or the about page
Mhm.
and don't really they they're just very literal about it. And if you're strategic, like you mentioned before, and you write your about the about page so that it's just like, hey, I have this education, these are the people I've worked with, and these are the results I've got, far
Mhm.
more effective marketing than by just giving your history of your life.
Yeah, I mean, so I partially agree with that, although I do kind of feel like in my mind, your whole website should be doing that. So your whole website should be like, what are my skills? What's my unique selling proposition? How am I going to help you? And here's proof. I do kind of feel like the about page to me, sometimes I feel like it does need a bit more personality, and it does need a bit more personal information. Cause I think like, I think the way buyers are today, I think things like support local, like I look at things like support Canadian businesses, especially right now, like people like to understand there's a human behind it. And so I agree. Like you don't need to go into like super in-depth detail about every,
Mm,
milestone of your life. But I do think having a little bit of personality can help make that feel a bit more human. One thing I think on about pages that I don't love is like when there is no information about the team at all or the person behind it.
mm,
Sometimes it'll just be like a mission statement, which is fine. But it's like, but is there a face to the business? Is there people that I can look up on LinkedIn? Like, are you legit? And to me, I talk to the clients a lot about that is like, don't be afraid to like put your face on your website. Like it makes you more
mm.
trustworthy because there's a real human being behind it? So totally agree with you, but I also think there's an opportunity to almost make it more human while you're showing that value that you can provide at the same time.
That's a great tip. Yeah, I hadn't looked at it from that aspect. So yeah, you do need the humanity. And it's funny that you say about the picture because it's something I advise people all the time. It's like, why you don't have a picture. There was one
Yeah.
story of this designer who I helped, and she did people's spaces. She did beautiful work. Like her work was
Mhm.
amazing. But on her
Mhm.
about me page was a picture of her in the corner in the desk, and as the back of her head at
Yeah,
her
fun.
desk. And
Yeah.
I was like, what are you just trying to say here? And as soon as I said it, she was like, oh my God, I get it now. Like
Yeah,
sometimes they need that being pointed out
for sure.
by and you do need to have a certain amount of face and the human element. So I totally
For
think that's
sure.
a great tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people are a bit nervous about like it's hard when you run your own business because you do have to do that branding piece, right? Where you have to be the face of your organization. And some people hate that. I didn't
Yep.
love it when I started. I've become more comfortable with it because I'm like you have to. Like I think if you're going to run your own business, you have to kind of be put your face forward, so that people can recognize you. That brand awareness piece is like so important. And I think there's people feel like if they're nervous, they just will hide behind, this generic about page with nothing on it. And it's like, well, then people can't make that connection. So it's a trade off if you decide not to. I think you lose some of that impact that you could have from a branding perspective.
And can we also talk about the grumpy face? Like, why do people insist on putting up a grumpy face? Like, that is going to be compelling to work with you. Like, some of them, and not to generalize, but it is mostly men who do this, and they have this absolutely horrifically grumpy face. And I'm like, I know you in person. If I didn't know you
Yeah.
in person, I'm not sure if I'd be using your brand.
Totally. Well, and I feel like it's like I'm a serious professional businessman. Like, you can take me seriously because I'm not smiling, which I feel like is like, a bit old school in its approach. Because I think now we're like, I want to know that you have empathy and you're warm and welcoming. And so yeah, it's not a great approach for sure.
No, definitely, definitely. Let's just shift up a little bit because you are HubSpot certified. I've
Mhm,
done a lot of HubSpot training too. I love that platform, but
mhm.
um, you've helped people work through certain things with it. And how would you say a tool like HubSpot? It doesn't have to be HubSpot, but HubSpot is one of the better ones. How do they turn cold data into stories and things that businesses can use in their in just how do they make it useful to justify some of these costs are enormous. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. Like I think so I've been using HubSpot for like 13-ish years now. I started when I was working in the UK, I worked at an agency that was a HubSpot reseller, and that was like my first foray into the platform. And I remember just being blown away. I'm like, this is so incredibly powerful. Like it was kind of marketing automation had just sort of like come on the scene, and they were one of the first sort of companies to have a platform like this. Now it's huge. It's like sales and service and e-com and ops, and it's got a whole bunch of different features. It's such a robust tool. But I think where I have kind of found my niche within HubSpot and where I try and help clients, my clients are not not they're not giant companies, so they don't have huge budgets, but you can still get a lot of value even out of the kind of the starter packages on HubSpot. And I think what it
oh, for
helps
sure,
with
yeah.
for yeah, totally. Like I think it's, they can be very expensive. So if you move up to higher level packages, you're going to be paying a lot more, but there is still value to get out of the those intro packages. And I think for a lot of clients, like I'm working with one right now, and they're currently managing their database like in Excel spreadsheets, right? And it's like super ineffective. They're big enough that they need a proper process. They need a platform to manage this for them. They want to have a better strategy around like sales forecasting and pipeline management and database management. And so I'm working on onboarding them right now, and they're on the starter package, so it's not a crazy investment. But where it helps the most, I think, is what HubSpot is really powerful at is personalizing content and segmenting your messaging. So I think when it comes to email marketing, being able to segment your lists and write and create messaging that's targeting them specifically is super helpful. It's very difficult to do that if you don't have a CRM, because if you're trying to like segment an Excel sheet and upload it to your platform for email marketing, it's like it's very messy. So HubSpot makes it cleaner, where you can kind of say, okay, I want to write to only people that work in HR, and I'm going to send a promo email and just talk about the challenges that people in HR are having and how this product helps solve it. So that's, I think, where like HubSpot adds a lot of value, is really like in segmenting your data so that you can tell more relevant stories. Because the problem is if you're sending out batch emails to everybody, it's really hard to write a message that's going to resonate with everyone. So that's where I think I've added a lot of value with my clients, is like creating campaigns specific to those groups, writing messaging that's relevant to them. But I mean, HubSpot has a ton of amazing free features. Like I think just all of the automation it offers. It's also got, everything has AI now, but it does have some pretty cool AI integrations. Like it's got data like enrichment. So if you have a data list but you're missing like the first name or their address or their phone number, it'll basically like fill it out for you, which is kind of cool because it's up to this point been a pretty laborious process to do that. So a lot of like nerdy things that it's very good at. But I'm a huge proponent of HubSpot, and it's really helped me also manage my own pipeline and my own client management as well. So yeah, it's got definitely a place for small businesses, even though sometimes the price of the bigger packages can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, and the uh the other benefit of email marketing is the hidden benefit with email marketing. I love all these hidden benefits. Is that when you are um, segmenting your audience, you are allowing Gmail or whatever provider to actually get more directly into inboxes than you are by not getting into the inboxes. And so that's the what I find most secretive is that people don't realize that when you segment something very specifically, you're going to get a higher open rate and more also specifically a higher engagement rate. And
Hmm.
and that's where HubSpot can really shine. If I'm like I own Footprints Music in Hamilton, as you know, and if I'm sending a whole bunch of messages to parents whose children are guitar players, and I'm sending them a whole bunch of piano messaging, it's not
Hmm.
going to really do well, and it's going to hurt, not help
For sure.
your inbox opens. And it's a very, very huge indicator of how well your email marketing will be not only effective, but how Gmail kind of sees you as a company. Are you a
Hmm.
spammer? And if so, you can be heavily docked getting into to inboxes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think it's yeah, it just makes your marketing smarter and more streamlined. And I think it just makes you look kind of more professional, which a lot of businesses are looking for when they're doing their marketing, especially if they don't have a strong marketing background. I think HubSpot can help you kind of elevate your marketing to look more polished.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so words do matter. We've come to that conclusion. That's important.
Totally.
And how do you rate though for something like BritBox, which was, or sorry, not BritBox, BrainBox.
Hmm.
BritBox is obviously not the
I love
same thing
Britbox.
on Amazon. Oh, I said the A word. Anyways, BrainBox, which is a lab in Toronto. They're a tech company. It's got to be challenging to balance the tech stuff with the human stuff of getting that message across. So, what are the toughest bridges that you've had for a client like that, where it's very technically oriented, but you need this strong messaging to come out for the audience, buyer, client, what have you?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So actually Brainbox was a really fun project to work on. The owner is actually an old colleague of mine, like one of our first jobs together, way back in the day. We worked together and he and I have like a very similar approach to marketing in that he was also very focused on, how are we helping our clients and how are we solving challenges for them. And I think, they didn't really none of the copy is really overly technical. It's really again about solving challenges for them and also how they are different in their market. So again, this kind of comes back to like how important your brand messaging and positioning is because you can talk about the technical capabilities you have, which I think are not unimportant, but if you're trying to influence and persuade, it's probably about what sets you apart. So probably a lot of the people in his team, I mean, they are a very technically, qualified group of people that work with him. But I think what sets him apart is really like going back to things like he really understands his clients' businesses and the team really understands the client's business. They look for creative solutions to the problems they're having. So they try not to offer like cookie cutter products and services. They try and really find solutions that are specific to them. So for example, one of their clients, and I wrote the case studies too, one of their clients was Camp Robin Hood, which is a camp in Toronto, and they were having issues with their busing system. Like it was too complex and they had to pick up kids and drop them off every day, and they basically like created an app to help solve that problem. So the client didn't come to them to say, I need this technical solution. They were like, this is my problem. How do I fix it? And their
Mm,
job is to have that understanding of like, we know the tools we have. We know the technical toolbox that we have. What is the right solution for this specific challenge? And that was really what set them apart. Also things like the level of service and the quality of the team and that kind of thing. But it was really like their ability to solve challenges. And I think with a lot of tech companies, like the features are important, but they're not the most important thing. When you're writing copy, it's like how do we persuade in a way that shows we add value, we understand our clients, and we have understood our market so that we can set ourselves apart. And that to me is where that the copywriting is super important, because like I'm not a technical writer. I don't understand the ins and outs of app development from like a technical perspective, but I know how to write copy that'll influence decision makers who need to decide which app development agency they're going to hire. So I think it's like, and again, obviously understanding the language, and a lot of that came through interviews with the owner of Brainbox, and he's very technically astute. But it was more about like, how do we talk to these people that maybe the people making the decisions aren't that technically aware, but they know that they need help with the problem. So again, it kind of comes back to like, who's your audience, because they might, even if you offer a technical solution, they might not be technically minded. You might have to speak to them in a different way in order to kind of engage and persuade them.
Yeah, and that is also kind of, as we've spoken about or earlier, it is kind of a problem that if you are technically minded, if you are the owner of that company, you
Mhm.
do have a generalization to talk more about the technical stuff that might lose your audience. Whereas someone
Totally.
from the outside perspective can be like, okay, hey, I mean, the bus example is perfect. Like that's just like
Mhm.
here's a problem, and here's
Yeah.
how we can solve that problem, and that's uh, yeah, no, that's great. That's definitely great. Um, so a lot of the themes from some of the other businesses that I've interviewed is just how sustainability and being green is important to them, and how it's really helped their businesses. Like, you know, Democracy gets all of their stuff locally.
Mhm.
Bardot tries to get their stuff all locally.
Mhm.
All their stuff is locally purchased, which helps with tariffs and all that we hear in the news about everything.
Mhm.
But you also worked with Decra's their sustainability pages, but again,
Mhm.
it got into science based targets, and has writing that kind of copy changed how you see Hamilton? Do you find that when you write copy, it changes your opinions about things, and especially in something like that where there is this push for green, and like Hamilton is starting to try and turn old factories into something new and clean. And do you find that your copywriting has changed how you think about things?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I like writing about so many different industries and topics, because I learn stuff all the time. And I think same with when I was a journalist, it was the same thing. Like you learn so much every day when you're writing about different topics and different stories. So absolutely, it changed. It educates me, which I think I'm a pretty curious person, so I love learning new things, and I love especially speaking to experts who like obviously know their stuff. Decra was a great project to work on. So they offer basically certifications for companies for a whole bunch of things, but one of them is sort of like green energy certifications, and having that kind of like sustainability initiatives, those type of things, but becoming actually certified. So a lot of companies can say we're being environmentally conscious, or we're making green decisions, but like this is how you get like legitimately certified for things like net zero, science-based targets, that kind of thing. So it was really interesting. Like I think it's very complex, like obviously how these like carbon credits work, and your carbon footprint, and understanding the impact that you have, and not only your business but the supply chains that you rely on, making sure that they're sustainable as well, who you're purchasing from. So like the examples you gave were great. Like it's not just necessarily like the decisions you're making as a business, but the suppliers you use and the decisions they're making. So it's really this ecosystem in terms of being sustainable. um, and I actually, another client I did work with was this was like one of my first clients, was a coffee roastery in Sioux Lookout, which was like very interesting. It was a really cool passion project for the owner. But he talked about like he literally flew to South America to meet the coffee makers, the people who were sourcing the coffee beans. He knew every single person in the chain, when he was, from the farmers who were picking them to where they were processed to how they were shipped, like every single person he had met personally, so that he could verify that that was an ethical, sustainable supply chain that he was part of.
Wow.
So and that's a huge investment. Like that's a huge investment in time and money, but it's important to him because he wanted to run a business that was ethically minded and sustainable. So I think it really changed how I approach talking to businesses that are focused on sustainability, because I think a lot of the time, they talk about greenwashing and you might just slap we're sustainable, but it's like, again, it goes back to like, well, prove it. Do you have your certification? Do you understand how your suppliers are involved in sustainability and being ecologically conscious. So I think it's, I've learned a lot. And I think Hamilton, yeah, like it's definitely going through a period of change, being a steel city, and having that impact on the environment is like, how can we kind of make positive impacts? And yeah, like, reuse and reclaim factories. One of the things I love in terms of like Hamilton's architecture is like when we keep old facades of high rises, or we try and integrate new and old and do a lot of reuse. I'm working with an architecture firm, and they're very focused on reusing old materials is part of their business. So, I think demo can become incredibly wasteful, but they're trying to find ways to use those materials in the new builds as well. And I think we as like consumers are really into that. We love to, antique shopping, thrifting's becoming bigger. I think reclaiming, having pieces that have character and history, especially in a city like Hamilton that is like has such a deep and rich history. It's like, well, how can we continue um, to salvage that and also be environmentally conscious? So yeah, I think there's a real push both on the consumer and business side, and then especially when it comes to how you write about your business, being mindful of that within your copy.
Yeah, and what you touched on there is that your values are attracting your clients. And that's
Totally.
important, and also kind of, I don't want to say an unspoken rule, but it's kind of an unspoken rule. Like when you put your values on your copy and in your business, people notice. And
Hmm.
while you might not be a trackable metric or a KPI,
Hmm.
it really does. It's a way of standing out with just by being you, by being a genuine person that you are, or the values that the business want to run.
For sure. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
backing those up. So, like, the coffee example is a good one. Like, you can say you're sustainable, but this guy's proving it because he knows every single person along that supply chain. So, again, it's like having values, but really backing them up and following through, I think is the big piece for sure.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Okay. So, final question. So, what trends do you see coming with copywriting, either through business voices or values, like we've spoken about, digitally or on paper? Because people forget that we still have paper and non-digital. But what are some trends that you see, if anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and totally on paper, like it's funny because I also write for Hamilton City Magazine, which has a print version. So if yeah, just a little plug for Hamilton City Magazine. If you aren't subscribed, you should. It's a great arts and culture magazine in Hamilton. And it's actually like the print version is beautiful. So yes, can't forget about print. Um, but I think it's a good question on trends. Like I think, obviously AI is like so huge right now, and I think we're really like learning as we go with it, and I use it a lot in my work. But I think there was an idea, even 6 months ago, it's like, oh, they're just going to completely replace copywriters and content marketers, and their jobs are done. And I think we're coming back around, like the pendulum swinging the other way, to be like, actually everyone can tell when it's just like pure AI slop, and you still need a human being to like edit and refine and have some discernment and judgment over the copy. So I think there'll be a push back towards like more human focused copy, not a rejection of AI entirely, but like, we will become, again, we are skeptical. So I think we'll become more skeptical of writing that doesn't sound like it was written by a human. And we'll want to integrate that human in the loop approach to AI usage going forward. Um, I think that's one big trend. Another one I think again is like smaller businesses really investing in these types of like social proof. So case studies, really amping up things like reviews, testimonials. One of the things when I do website projects is like really focusing on their homepages, like try and back up everything you're saying with all of this social proof. So show case studies, show testimonials, show your ratings. And it's forcing, I think, a lot of businesses to invest in that, because it's not enough to just say you're great. I think people are really looking for that proof. And I think a lot of businesses are going to have to kind of come through and find ways to do that so they can gain the trust of their audience.
Hmm. Yeah, back to the AI because it is enormous. Just quickly, just
Mhm.
some people are saying that we are in an AI bubble and that it will burst. kind of similar
Yeah.
to the .com at the late
Yeah.
90s, early 2000s. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely see that happening for sure. Well, Vanessa, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. We
Yeah,
always
you
have
as
great
well.
conversations, and you are part of Greenlight Content Marketing, which I will put in the show notes how everyone can get in touch with you. And thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You too. We'll chat soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Take
Okay.
care.
Bye, Alex.